Hey guys, what's happening? So I wanted to bring this information to you for a while now, and we got caught up because so many things were happening. But I think this is an opportune time as well to do it. So I told you about Trinidad being used as a kind of backdoor hub for deportations, and both for those who might otherwise get lost in the shuffle, and for certain people of interest. So the thing is, Trinidad lies at a real crossroads in terms of its geography and its infrastructure. So it's very critical to the U.S. government, and they have a vested interest in controlling many things that are happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So as the deportations continue, think about this. When a deportee is sent to Trinidad, they aren't just dropped off and forgotten. No, 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 no. Like other countries, they could be, but not in Trinidad. This is where the covert operation starts. And what we found out is that many of the individuals sent to Trinidad have lived in the US for years. I'm not talking about Trinidadian nationals now, okay? Sometimes even decades, and have little to no family in Trinidad. And that's by design based on the information coming out that we got. These individuals are often placed into what the government calls voluntary return programs, and the US call them voluntary return programs. But these are really just cover stories. Instead, what we found is that they're being observed into society. They often disappear into what we call what a maze, just disappear into a maze, and often on a US owned project or military contracts. You may not even know about these things because they're not talked publicly. So our sources are saying the part that makes all of this interesting and more fascinating actually is that Trinidad, with its relatively stable political environment, has been quietly transformed into a test bed for US policy. And many deportees are not just workers, they said to us in Trinidad. They are part of an experiment in what you would call society control and economic manipulation. Now, US corporations have long had interest in Trinidad's energy sector, particularly its natural gas resources. So there has been a long-standing push by these companies to use cheap labor to extract and refine these resources, out of Trinidad. Now, the thing is, what we found was that there was a military link, and there's a question to that because all of the information is not here. So the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean is no secret. I think we all know that by now. But what's more covert is the level of coordination between the US and the Trinidadian government. And you see, Trinidad is strategically located just off the coast of Venezuela. And as tensions have increased in the region over the years, we've seen that the US has used its relationship with Trinidad to monitor and control everything from oil pipelines to what you would say potential anti American groups in nearby Venezuela. So, what happens when you have large number of deportees, many with criminal records, many who have lost what you would say all ties to their home countries, being sent to a place like Trinidad? Some might say that these individuals serve as maybe a buffer or form a plausible deniability. However, what we found out that they are placed in jobs that have zero visibility or oversight, often working on dangerous offshore industries or on secretive military bases, which leave them open to manipulation or even darker purposes. Some will tell you that, uh, you know, never heard of that. These things are not going on. Well, you don't know, and that's the problem. And because the island is such a hub for energy production, the deportees become part of the machinery behind it. And the US has been using them to prop up their control over resources in Trinidad for a very long time. So many things. You heard about it's Petrotrin when they closed it down and all that kind of stuff. You remember that? It's so many things happening. You have to go back and look over a lot of notes in Trinidad, people. But there is a deeper layer underneath all of this. What I found out is that Trinidad proximity to Venezuela places it, would you say, in right in the middle of a geopolitical tug of war surrounding the global drug trade. And Venezuela, historically is a key player in the movement of illicit drugs, and they has had a fair share of connections with cartels and shady networks. So many deportees being sent to the region. So it's not really far fetched to consider that some are being recruited or manipulated into joining criminal syndicates, whether they know it or not. I mean, what's more alarming, I found out, is that the possibility that some deportees may actually be planted in these cartels destabilizing groups as part of the U.S. counterintelligence operations. Now, think about it. A deportee who has no connection to Trinidad is suddenly inserted into a community or a group that can easily be manipulated. And they might start out as low level operatives in the drug trade or black market dealings, but they could also be used for high level intelligence operations, ensuring that maybe the US interests in the region remain unchallenged. There's a lot of things that are happening in these islands that we really don't know about. The question is, what is their ultimate goal in all of this? Because there must be something. Trinidad's role as a staging ground for US deportation is all about control. The US wants to keep the Caribbean, especially Trinidad, under its influence without, I would say, overtly expanding its military presence or drawing too much attention. Do you remember when there was a press conference and this big thing came up when the Trinidad news, they talked about U.S. bases in Trinidad and using Trinidad as a base to do things for Venezuela or launch attacks in Venezuela. You remember when Rowley defended it staunchly and said no and embarrassed the journalists and stuff like that? Yeah. Well, it's all in the shadows, my people, all in the shadows. And so that is why I said to you that the role of Trinidad as a staging ground for U.S. deportation is about control. U.S. wants to keep Caribbean and especially Trinidad under its influence without overly expanding its military presence or drawing too much attention. This is the information that we found out. So by using deportees in this way, the U.S. is able to maintain what you call a foothold in the region, all while having a disposable labor force that isn't tied to domestic policies or restrictions. So some of the people used to work on certain things in Trinidad. They really have nothing to do with Trinidad or anything to do with anything at all. It's just about the Americans doing their work. In the end, what is happening is that the deportations to Trinidad are part of a much larger strategy. So not only Trinidadians coming home, but people who don't even have an inkling to Trinidad and Tobago to manipulate economies, they maintain the geopolitical dominance and leverage the Caribbean as a, I would say, a strategic pressure point in the fight over energy resources and military influence. Now, remember, now, here's what I found out was the most unsettling part because this isn't just about Trinidad. It's happening on a much larger scale across the Caribbean and Latin America. So when the U.S. government ships people off to these regions, they aren't always sending back to their home countries. Sometimes they're sending them into the shadows, into places where they can become part of a much darker scheme. You remember just yesterday they were saying that they intend to have discussions with El Salvador president, because they want to send some of the worst criminals there as well to their jails. But they won't end up in the jail alone. You know that we all know what's happening there. So if you ask the right questions, I think you might start to see some of the hidden patterns behind what's happening in the Caribbean, and the and the role Trinidad, of course, plays in the grandest scheme. You gotta keep your eyes peeled, people, because there's a lot more going on beneath the surface that we really don't know, and I intend to find out. But this is just surface information, really. I mean, if you dig too deep, your computer may get shut down. So I tend to bring to you some of the information that in summary form, But look out, look out for what's happening around Trinidad and Tobago when these people are coming back home. Look out for the different nationalities you see end up in Trinidad. All right. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.